this remains very, very inconsistent. So, ladies and gentlemen, like as the MEC has already pitched, the purpose of this particular commission, our objectives, colleagues and panelists, is to try to identify key performance indicators that can be adopted nationally to measure and to benchmark industry efficiency, industry productivity, and also likewise aspect of accountability, which you cannot take our minds from. The other aspect I also want us to look at as part of our objective is also try to deliberate on institutional and policy mechanisms for improving project performance. I think this is long overdue. Performance in terms of procurement reforms, digital integration, and also how do we enhance monitoring systems like the minister talked about earlier today. And lastly, our other objectives is to see how do we formulate practical recommendations that we inform the forthcoming declaration on unlocking infrastructure delivery. So, ladies and gentlemen, our discussion this afternoon is not about apportioning blames. It is about how do we charter a path forward. So I believe that the CIDB's renewed strategic vision kind of really emphasize on performance excellence and also transformation and inclusivity. So I think looking forward, we're going to be hearing from the panelists just a 3-minute speech in terms of looking at the performance of the industry. Where do you think we should be? What are the things that you basically envisage that we should be doing to actually move the industry forward, considering that we have been doing very well, there's a lot of funding that have been injected. So we're going to be hearing from them between 2 to 3 minutes, just a quick summary before we go into the informed question. So I'm going to start from Mr. Andres.
Thank you, Chairperson. Once again, colleagues and distinguished guests, my name is Andres Segeto from the Office of the AG. Good afternoon to everybody. Good afternoon to the Honorable Minister and all protocol observed. So from our point of view, obviously we've got a particular role that I need to just escalate or elevate for the purpose of creating common understanding. So the Office of the AG, as we are all aware, is primarily tasked with conducting the audits of public sector institutions, including the Public Works portfolio and the CIDB. So therefore, we are primarily concerned with issues of protection of state resources insofar as it relates to the deployment of these resources to achieve certain government objectives. Now, having said that, as the Office of the AG, we've also invested over the years quite extensively in building institutional capacity in order for us to be able to do certain work, because you would appreciate I'm an accountant, I'm an auditor by training, trade, and qualification, and therefore I then move into the built environment and I'm expected to audit the built environment and then provide certain recommendations. Through the extensive investment in the capacity, we've been able to identify that you've correctly underscored, Chairperson, or highlighted a number of significant deficiencies, delayed projects, cost overruns, lack of project management in those spaces. And all of those obviously then come at an additional cost to the fiscus, and hence obviously also our primary concern with regard to that. And so in this particular regard, we've issued a number of recommendations. So you would appreciate our recommendations are directed at the client departments. And yes, my colleague from the Public Works portfolio, we do indeed audit also all institutions of government, including the client departments as well as local government. Some of our recommendations that we've issued indeed speak to enhancement of monitoring and oversight processes when we dispense with scarce resources, the enhancement of project management disciplines, and also critically and more importantly also consequence management, enforcing consequences where we find non-performing contractors or officials within those spaces that are not doing what they ought to be doing. Thank you, Chair.
All right, thank you very much. I think we go to Mr. Kasim from CIDB point of view.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, colleagues. My name is Ismail Kasim. I'm from the CIDB. We've heard this morning about the budgets, that the money is there, but we also heard about the consistent underspend of those budgets. And also in terms of the implications, the negative implications regarding those budgets in terms of employment and the like. So our view in terms of the budgets, the CIDB has a mandate to monitor budgets, the government spend, That's what we do. We do it on a regular basis, a quarterly basis, and we see there are systemic challenges regarding this. So what we do is this information is readily available. We get it from National Treasury, and then we analyze these. And we have consistent underspend. And if you look at the provinces as well as the municipalities, there is a distinction between the spend of the provincial infrastructure departments. They do fairly good in terms of they spend 93% of their budget. The challenge still remains with the municipalities. They spend about 80% of their budget. And if one looks at the total contribution to public expenditure, the two of these spheres of government, provincial government as well as local government, they make up about 55% of public expenditure. And therefore, we are looking at this, how can we then improve in terms of the spend to have the sort of advantages that comes from that. But saying that, the systemic issues, we're looking at it not only as a monitoring and evaluation part, but we are now looking and moving towards sharing this information with the provinces so that we can understand those systemic issues and the causes of that. And what with our discussions is National Treasury as well as the CIDB, we have the infrastructure, the IDMS, the Delivery Management Systems, both from a national perspective as well as a local government perspective. And it seems that that is one of the biggest challenges that our government departments are not utilizing fully. And that is where we are driving towards in terms of how do we now assess public sector entities, their utilization of these infrastructure delivery management systems. Then also in terms of how do we then get all spheres of government working together in terms of the assessing. Another role of the CIDB is also in terms of looking at the performance of all sectors, all government spheres. And therefore, we have also the responsibility of assessing the performance of both the client, the PSPs, as well as the contractors on these projects. And what we are driving and looking at is how can then we look at unifying the performance of all spheres of governments so that we can have a one voice, a standardization, which was talked about this morning, as well as looking at the other players in terms of that. And therefore, we are looking at the systems or assessments or those type of things, perhaps that we can use, and hopefully at the outcome of this, we will have those sort of assessments. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. I think, let's go to Ms. Hughes.
Thank you very much, Prof. Again, my name is Zimbini Hill, and I've got the greatest privilege and honor to be the chairperson of the Independent Development Trust, the IDT. The IDT, we are an implementation agent for social infrastructure on behalf of government. First, our mother department, the Department of Public Works, and then all other client departments. Our primary stakeholder at the moment happens to be the Department of Basic Education. And we all know the backlog in school infrastructure. We happen to be at the coalface and the heart of the opportunities in the industry as well as the problems in the industry, because we are the implementation agent. So if things go wrong, we are probably the pilot of what you can see when things can go horribly wrong, both from a governance perspective as well as an implementation perspective. But we are also possibly the blueprint of what you can see when things go right in its silos. So at the IDT at the moment, we've got an incredible mandate, because social infrastructure is not just schools, but it's rural roads, it's clinics, it's everything that connects particularly our rural communities. So when we look at our role in industry and we start to look at the things that go wrong, and we look and we introspect at our own failings, we start to see how an institution can be captured by weak governance, how an institution can be captured by corruption, and actually how we don't count the cost of bureaucracy. Because the cost of bureaucracy is delayed or services not delivered, and that cost probably can equate to even larger than the cost of corruption. So when we look at what can go right, we start to look at how do we reform the institution itself from a governance perspective, from a leadership perspective, and from a systematic perspective to allow us to then deliver services to our people. The things that do go well at IDT in its silos is that because we are at the hard face of the delivery, we've got professionals who can deliver effectively. The weaknesses are more systematic in the funding model. Our planning, I think, is very poor because we plan for infrastructure as if we're planning for annual consumption, which doesn't work. So some of the weaknesses we see at IDT from a budgeting and a financing perspective of infrastructure is around departments needing to reprioritize their budgets. Now, for infrastructure, which is not annual spend, it kills the industry. So it doesn't kill the IDT in itself, it kills the construction industry because you've got the construction industry which needs to leave site because they've got invoices that are not being paid. So the conversations we would want to have as the IDT from an industry perspective is how we align planning as well as the ring fencing of infrastructure projects as well as its funding.
Thank you very much. I think I'll go to Mr. Lungile. A quick piece from you.
Good afternoon, Prof. My name is Lungisa Chele. I'm a co-founder of a grade 9 civil engineering multidisciplinary infrastructure business. A quantity surveyor by profession, and I've been in the industry near 22 years now. I begin with this because I think it's important to note that 11 years ago when we started our business, we were grade 1 CE. And in about 8 to 9 years, we've been able to build a business to become a grade 9. And I believe why that happens is because of skills, you know, because there's a big call, I think, that the public sector must professionalize itself. And I think the construction industry must do the same. And I think it must do the same across all gradings because and Prof, I'm going to speak from a practitioner's point, because it is us on a daily basis that when we hear in a forum like this, in a summit like this, about challenges with the construction mafia and the war being won, we're not feeling it as well as you report it. So, you know, and I think it's important that we note that the battle isn't over yet. We are on the construction sites on a daily basis, and we remain confronted with this issue, much as there's been progress that is being made. I think that's important to note. The other thing I think that is important to note as practitioners is, the view we have, Prof, is that we work both in the public and private sector, is how the state procures goods and services and the delays that lie therein. Wherein, for us as businesses, as an industry, we commit resources. And we did the numbers a few weeks ago on a regular basis. We do this check. You know, how much does it cost a contractor to actually package a bid? And depending obviously on the size of the bid, if you start looking at the hours spent, you start looking at the IP that we spend to put a bid together only for the state not to go ahead with the project, is very frustrating for us. And you are able to then compare this with the public sector. Not only that, maybe I should add, furthermore, you will find that once a bid has gone in, some departments can take as much as 12 months to 18 months to actually conclude a procurement process. So one is bothered by that delay, and I think that's something that frustrates us as an industry. Why does it frustrate us? We are able to compare that to the public sector. To the private sector. The private sector is able to put a bid out to the market for 2 weeks, and then in the second month they've evaluated, they've concluded. So one is able to then ask the question, why is the private sector able to procure goods and services for the same work. If Anglo, for example, I'll use the word, wants to build a road, within 2 weeks, within a period of 2 months, they're able to conclude. So those are some of the things that frustrate us. And then I think lastly, colleagues, is the issue of skills, and I want to hammer it. The industry way it is, Prof, is that the construction industry is busy. I think construction companies particularly do have work, but our biggest challenge is we are able to secure work, but we haven't got the people who are skilled, who are trained, who are experienced enough to go and execute the contracts we have. Then what you then find is starting a project quick enough in an agile way is delayed by the skills gap, because to find the right skills in the market is quite a difficult thing at the moment. So I think for me, at the core of it, therein lies an opportunity to be clear. I mean, you mentioned, Prof, that the average age of a construction professional is 50 years old. That is not right. You know, we need to address it. So skills are a big issue. Then in closing, Prof, I think for me, the commitment made by the president of the $1 trillion commitment for infrastructure in our country, that is much needed. We want to see government see it through, because this thing of extending bids, validities, is the very thing that doesn't allow service delivery to occur. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. I think let's hear from Mr. Chris Kambe. Yeah, let's get a pitch.
Yeah, thank you, Prof, and good afternoon, everyone. So without going into the questions, and I could probably ramble on for a very long time, just a little bit. My name is Chris Campbell. I'm the CEO of an organization of consulting engineering companies. It's been around for 72 years. I've been in the industry, not consulting alone, for 40 years. I have, in construction, consulting engineering, in a manufacturing environment. I've worked for the state in a railway environment on flagship lines, maintaining infrastructure for the iron ore and the coal line. And that's my pedigree, but that's not what we're here to talk about. For me, and my input to this discussion is that, you know, if you ask me about the industry, I often respond in a manner that says it depends who you ask. Because you may find that some companies have some work, some companies hardly have any, and it just depends. It's like winning the lotto these days, which is wrong. You win a tender. We shouldn't be winning tenders in intellectual services. So our starting point is what we lament most. We need to move away from an open tender process for what is actually intellectual services. You can put bids out for tea and coffee. But if we continue to do intellectual services in this manner, we are going to misstep, and it causes a lot of frustration. If I give you a view of the industry and the size of the various companies, let's just take consulting engineering, which you could get a company that's made up of 10 people, 5 people. You get a company of 1,800 people, employees. You get multinationals who have a global footprint because their owners sit somewhere in Canada or Singapore or somewhere. Yeah, we do have those companies locally. And we sit with this dichotomy where, on the one hand, you want to create opportunities, and we need to grow new timber in the industry. But I think there's also this notion that I can get rich quickly. So now I leave this company the way I can get this global exposure, and I go start up something on my own. And a public entity puts out the tenders, they set aside, and for a limited period of time, I may enjoy the privilege of getting lucky and winning a tender. It's not sustainable, because when that mat gets pulled out from under those companies and they haven't reached the maturity, they're just going to go under. We're seeing the same short-termism decision-making in how we apply, let's just localization versus enterprise and supplier development in our BBBE codes. You get companies in construction, startups being handheld, assisted. They start growing with the construction company through that process, but they're limited to a location of work, because now that same company who gets the bid for the construction side of things, dare not take their empowerment partner along with them into those environments, because there's going to be a big bun fight. We need to look at how do we balance the sustainability, developing our companies, and bring on board local people, but we must be sensible about it. We can't do one or the other. We must find a way of doing both for sustainability. And in the consulting engineering, what keeps our larger companies alive and in this country is that they have a global footprint. So many of them are doing work. They're the factory, if you want to put it that way, for their global partners, for the engineering activities elsewhere in the world. We got so much need and demand over here. And until and when we heard the president create a lot of enthusiasm and hype, we don't want to hold our breath for too long. We may not outlive the time it will take for that to realize, and we need to get that show on the road. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I think let's take the last commentary from Professor Bimbola.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Abimbola Windapo. I'm from the University of Cape Town, an academic. So our work as academics is to investigate problems and try and find solutions to the problems. So it gives me joy and a privilege for me to be here today to contribute to Commission 1. And so we can look at the construction industry from our research, from our past research. The construction industry is a significant contributor to employment. We had the president and then the minister also say that in the last quarter, the construction industry provided 130,000 new jobs. And also the construction industry provides the much needed infrastructure that we need. It contributes to the economy, but then it faces significant challenges from our research. So some of these challenges are the fact that it's highly cyclical. You have money today, you have jobs today, you don't have jobs tomorrow. So it's a roller coaster thing. It's not steady. We heard that there is a consistent underspend by most municipalities. Contractors will be looking at budgets and hoping that these budgets will be spent, but it's not spent. And these budgets are supposed to translate into jobs, into work, and packaged into different types of jobs that they can do. Then we've also had the problems, the challenges of the payment systems that we have. Delayed payments. Contractors are not paid for 4 months, 6 months, sometimes never. They never get paid. And then also the procurement system. There's a problem, and this has gone. We've had this throughout the summit. Procurement system problem. So what's this procurement system problem? The procurement system problem is that the projects are being treated as one type of projects. So from our research in other industries like UK, Malaysia, what we found out is that knowledgeable clients would translate the projects are more productive and higher performance when you have knowledgeable clients. These are the clients that have the intellectual capacity or who know the science behind construction, who are in charge of that construction work. Because construction projects need to be embedded in the environment. And when I'm talking of environment, I'm not talking of the physical environment, I'm talking of the internal project environment, which is the complexity. So you have complex projects and you have very simple projects. So if the projects are simple, there's a way you treat it. If the projects are complex, there's a way complex projects are treated. And also in an environment that is very dynamic, like we have in South Africa, dynamic environments where you have the business forum, people who hijack projects and who will cause delays on projects. You have to consider that kind of environment when you are putting out the tender for the construction. So with this type of narratives, it points to a conclusion for me that improving the construction industry performance is a systemic problem that requires a coordinated reform across the procurement system. What type of procurement system do we have? What type of contracts do we have in place? Somebody complained to me during the lunch time. He says there's now this framework agreement. They register for the framework, 3 years, they don't get anything. So what type of procurement system do we have in place? The contractors need jobs. If we want to create skills, if we want to create more employment, we need the contractors to have jobs. They have a steady flow of jobs, and so they can grow and also provide the much necessary skills. We have seen construction companies failing. Then we need the money to be spent. This money that they say is available, it has to be spent. It has to be translated into work packages and so spent. Then we also need data, which is where the CIDB comes in. We need data, the data that tells us what is happening. How do we know a project is not performing? Somebody talked about the High Court that was built somewhere, a White Elephant project. It may have finished on time, it may perform in terms of the triple bottom line of time, cost, and quality, but then it's a White Elephant project. It's a project that we didn't need in the first case. So we need those types of benchmarks, those types of statistics that says these are how projects perform. We need to know the trends. Data is life. For us in the academia, we need those data. We need to analyze the data to be able to tell you that this is what is going on. These are the trends. This is what you have to do to be able to address those problems that we are facing in the construction industry. So the data, the what, and then the why. Why is it that way? That is where we come in to be able to interpret the data and say why things are happening the way they are. Then there's the new thing of digital. I'm over time. Okay, I'll talk about the digital infrastructure later.
No, we're still going to come there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Can we put our hands together for the panelists? Let me see, you want to say some things to what they have been discussing?
Thank you very much, Prof. I'm intrigued by the conversations that are taking place now. But what is key for me is that with all the challenges that have been raised, there are also alternatives in terms of how we resolve them. Key to everything else is also the role of the Auditor General in the space of infrastructure. And I agree with Ndade that as a province, I'll make an example about the Free State Province. There was an issue about a particular school where the Auditor General was auditing us, but remember, we implement on behalf of client departments, which is education and health and so forth and so on. And I can attest here on this podium that Auditor General has reformed its own office to a point whereby they've got capacity in other spaces like infrastructure. We are comfortable with how things are done because they go beyond the call of duty, beyond just auditing, but to come to say to you, this is what we think needs to happen. This is how you collaborate with other departments. Not that we can't do it ourselves, but it becomes a much more greater voice coming from audit. Because Auditor General is not a policeman. It's simply to say, you said you've got 100 rand, you're going to build a school for 100 rand. Where is the school? How have you spent money? But those collaborations and interactions are quite important. And Prof also from UCT raises a quite critical aspect to say, when you build, who do you build it for? For how much? How long? Who's the end user? That conversation needs to take place. Also, it is critical for us as government not to be fearful of institutions of higher learning because they are reservoirs of knowledge and research. We must continuously engage and work with them. And I must attest as well that as a Free State province, we have been able to work with the University of the Free State, especially in the architectural sector. So, because we've got professionals, you've got your engineers or civils, your architects, your project managers, because now it's a new thing in the industry. You need to have a project management program for you to be able to analyze and assess and work on projects. we continuously need to work with TVET's colleges as well, because that's where the skill, the raw skill comes from. Your so-called electricians and so forth, work that cannot be done by an engineer, because it does not matter whether you build a school or you build a hospital. When you don't have an artisan, you are not going to move. The person who puts those windows is an artisan. An electrician who puts those wires is an artisan. The floors and everything else. As I conclude, the state needs to sustain itself to a large extent. And it's quite unfortunate, it's it's catch-22 situation. When you build state capacity, you kill the industry from a business perspective, the contractors who would want to do business with us. Because I believe, and this is what we are putting in place in the Free State Province, that artisan development is a critical aspect for basic maintenance. I will not appoint contractors to do cleaning, basic painting of walls. I will not do it. That's why we're training artisans. I will not appoint contractors just to fix globes. It's not going to happen. And they know, officials are here. I always insist, but how do we get that balance? Where you build internal capacity with all your engineers, your professionals, and so forth and so on, without necessarily killing the industry from not from a tender perspective, from building the economy that we want, because you need both sides to build the economy. Thank you very much, Prof.
Thank you very much, MEC. I'm sure colleagues will agree with me that each of our panelists actually brings a very unique lens to this particular discussion. So I'm going to ask two questions in one to the panelists. Delegates, we are not forgetting that you are here. I think after this particular set of questions, we're going to open up to two questions. I think we'll just run it that way. So I'm going to add two questions in one. And I want to look at aspects of the policy, legislation, and also looking at industry environment. And I want to try to focus on the fact that there are frequent tender cancellations and non-awards. And this continue to kind of really disrupt delivery. We know that very well. And I want to really find out, what do you think are the root causes? And how can we mitigate them through better performance monitoring? That's my first question to the panelists. And the second one is, you are at liberty to pick on anyone. The second one is, how can we improve the quality of tender documentation? We heard the CEO of Lubicon talked about the tender documentation or submission of tenders. How can we improve the quality of tender documentation and specifications to minimize disputes, delays, and cost variations? These are the two questions I'm putting forward to the panel. After this particular round, we'll take 2-3 questions from the audience to speak to this aspect before we take another set of questions. Yes.
Okay, Madam Chairperson, you want to go first?
Okay. Maybe I want to have fun a little bit. And me having fun is to just put forward the things we don't talk about. And I'll talk about tender specifications. Because I think when we're thinking about it, we think about it as a relatively righteous scientific model, where a client has got an objective, and they sit and they put together a spec, and that spec goes out to market. But given where we are in South Africa, nefarious activities cannot happen without that tender document being hampered with.
Chair, without necessary, there's a gentleman who's speaking on the phone here and is disturbing us on the platform. Can we kindly, thank you very much, sir. Apologies, sincere apologies, Chair.
No problem. So sometimes our flawed tender specs are actually intentional, because they're intentional so that the bid itself can go to a non-deserving recipient. But how can we then improve the tender spec itself? One, everything is going to have to start with leadership. Because in leadership, we need to have people who want to do the right thing all of the time. And then we need to have systems in place to ensure that because it's not always, the flawed specifications are not always intentional. Sometimes it's because the people in the room don't fully understand industry. Because we've got PFMA, we've got supply chain, and we now have supply chain departments who are incredibly powerful, who will have a project sponsor, but it'll work within supply chain, and the technical skills are not in the supply chain to actually work out an appropriate spec that should go to industry, because we're not having conversations which are nimble enough, because not every project is going to require the same spec. So we don't have frameworks in place to be nimble enough to consult industry, because the one thing I've always asked myself is, how do we spec a school for 250 million when someone else has delivered it for 90? Is it because we didn't go out to say, for this kind of school, this is what the specification is? And it's two things. One, it's intentional, that it must be 250. Two, is because we don't have the right leadership and the resources and the right people at the table to actually be able to devise the spec. And I think we don't speak enough about how critical that process of a good technical spec that goes to industry is. We've seen it in renewable energy, where there was almost a central command which has done incredible procurement in the renewable energy space, but we don't then take those sort of things as pilots to say, how do we take what has worked well, and then we centralize it, or it doesn't need to be centralized, and we ensure that it works perfectly well in another space. So in summary, we first have to know what the weakness of that spec is, because it's either intentional or it's because there is not the right people at the table to devise the appropriate spec.
All right, thank you. Let's after Andres, then we'll come to Chris.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So, Chair, I'm quite pleased that I allowed Madam Chairperson to go ahead of me, because she's covered quite a couple of salient issues. So I think first and foremost, we have to acknowledge that and appreciate that, you know, if you look at public procurement in most African countries, it constitutes about 20% of GDP. So our government spent a lot of money to get things done and deliver on strategic imperatives and objectives, right? So there will always be a risk with regard to potential leakage and wastage. And therefore, the procurement regulations are a necessity. If you go to whichever country, European, Western, developed countries, they do have procurement regulations and laws that govern how they go about things. Whether the thresholds are the same, or whether they perform it in terms of the structural reforms being industry-specific or sector-specific, those are probably some of the distinguishing factors that we could also potentially learn from, but they are there. As long as there's money involved, there will always be a need for procurement. Having said that, in terms of the procurement processes, Madam Chairperson is quite right. Often in our work, we found that our client departments do not invest sufficient time in doing the upfront research to understand what it is that they are required to deliver and what would be the best modalities to get to that particular delivery point. So from that point of view, if you do not have the data, the information to be able to spec your tender correctly, it means that you'll accept whatever comes in, and that potentially could also result in tender cancellations, tender delays, because once the tenders are submitted and the evaluation process kickstarts, you then realize that, oh, actually what I've received does not get me to where I want to get to, and therefore you then engage in cancellations or long evaluation processes. Then, Chair, also please allow me to conclude with a good story to tell. I know when you deal with the Office of the AG, it is always understood that we will report and our findings are always, you know, bad news reporting. But we do find that there are institutions that are getting it right in public sector. You have your institutions such as SANRAL, your DBSA, and we actually give them the commendation in our general report, which is a consolidation of the annual outcomes of all the audit work that would have been performed by the Office of the AG. In that report, we actually do note and give best practices of institutions that are getting it right. Some of the basic things that are doing, to the chairperson's point, the research upfront, making sure that the tenders are spec'd correctly, making sure that the contract management processes when they contract up to date, and also making sure that when they are in the process of delivery, they are engaging in a process of proper and continuous monitoring and oversight using the right people as well.
All right, thank you very much. Mr. Chris?
Yeah, you know, I looked at your 4 questions, and it's almost part of the same family, the system. And I think that, you know, from the AG's office, he's pointed it out, is that if your starting point is wrong, then everything just starts going wrong as well. What am I talking about? I'm saying you go out to tender. Firstly, do you have the budget to start off with? Do you know what you want? What's the output, the end product? What problem are you trying to solve, right? Then you put out the tender, and we find invariably what's happening now is there's this sense of urgency because we're 5 years behind. So now we want to compress the process, and we want to have a turnkey project. But there's hardly any information available to put out to potential bidders for such a project. And then you do it anyway. Obviously, we see a lot of examples. I'm not going to name and shame any of the entities. It's very common in the public sector. You don't know what you want. You don't have enough information to give those whom you expect to respond so they can respond sensibly. Then you get the responses. And you're either going to get extremely low bids, and if they know a little bit more than what you do, the bid is 10 pages, the qualifications is 50. And the qualifications is like that maze. When you enter that, the end result is your project's going to cost you a whole lot more than you thought initially. Or you may get bids that are astronomically high, and then you have to ask yourself, but are these people smoking something? It's merely a case of how do these companies respond and cover themselves from a risk perspective. Because nobody can stay in business if you're blind to risk. And I think we also, I think in the public sector, you set yourselves up for failure if you simplistically assume that you can go for the least cost, whether it be in consulting engineering. In fact, that's a case in point. How do you get top-notch intellectual services at bargain basement prices? The two don't gel, they're on opposite poles. In a construction environment, if the bid looks low compared to others, best you go and look carefully why. Because there could be something you missed. I've actually come across a project once from a local authority that they were going to go broke on one project simply because they didn't do their homework on the real amount of rock that could be anticipated on a project. And the astute contractor bumped his price up there. You can't blame the contractor. He won the lotto. So we need to do that homework up front and manage the risk from a client perspective, because your service providers, those who want to stay in business are very astute and aware of how they manage their risks. The ones who think they can just come in cheap and haven't looked at the risk, they don't stay in business anyway.
Thank you very much. Mr. Ishmael?
Thank you, Chair, if I may come.
Go ahead.
I would like to return again to the infrastructure procurement and development management skills that I think we as a state, we seriously need to look at. All the points, for example, they're at a various stage of a review, for instance. I'm not going to go into the detail, we all know that. But if you go through those, for example, they're all reviews. It's either you stop or you proceed. You stop or you proceed based on your studies and what your examinations and all of those things. So when it comes to, for example, particularly also with the bid spec committee, for instance, the technical expertise relating to the required should have been done already up front in terms of those are the requirements and those are the specific people that we need to have in there. So I think there's a trend in terms of our public sector skills in terms of infrastructure procurement and delivery management, whether it is right from the start till the closeout in terms of contract management. I think that is where I see there's a serious challenge that we can sort of address those issues. Thank you, Chair.
All right, thank you. Should we take questions or do we have more commentary? Okay.
Maybe, Prof, just final comment from us as the contracting industry particularly, and the impact of the tendering processes. And I'm glad our colleagues within government, because these are their processes, I'm glad they're the ones who put up their hands to respond to them. I think the gap that there is, because we work both in the public and private sector, is evident in that, one, government is not agile, it's slow for bureaucratic reasons, which were explained by the AGA, and the reasons why they exist. And I think the trouble then is the way businesses tend to respond is they might look at the state and say the state only accepts the lowest bidder. And if the state only accepts the lowest bidder, then contractors who are more astute, who are more skilled, will generally look elsewhere. In other words, there is the potential that the state will continue to getting bids, the low bids from lesser competent contractors, purely because the more competent contractors are not going to stick around. They'll rather look at other sectors within the private sector and so forth. So it is a risk for the state that they should really review this lowest price issue because it's a challenge. And oftentimes you're probably not getting the creme de la creme of contractor that will actually execute the project within cost and time and professionally. I mean, on the 6th of May last year, we killed people. This industry killed 34 people in the Western Cape. And again, we have to deep into the reasons why. And oftentimes you'll find in the middle of that is incompetence from a professional point of view. So, or maybe someone who priced their contract low and they were not able to deliver the contract to the right spec, and then the outcome is a situation that we are all aware of. So this thing of accepting the lowest bidder is very much a challenge, and I think you should look at it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof.
Just to add on as well, the scenario you've described now is a traditional procurement system in which you have poor quality documentation and so on. I think we should also, when we embed our projects in the environment, we should also look at the most suitable contract form that we could use to undertake these projects, because we have the integrated contracting type of procurement, and we also have the consultant-led type of procurement. So I think that is very necessary, because if there's a rush, especially what we've had now, there's a rush to tender, there'll be many things missing, poor specifications, poor incomplete designs. Then we need to look at things like the outputs. What are the outputs? We don't look at the inputs, and we consider what outputs we want in those scenarios. Thank you.
Thank you very much. MEC?
This conversation around the lowest bidder, it's a very important conversation, because someone might ask, MEC, why do you know so much about procurement? Are you not getting your hand in the what, you know, on a lighter note? When I joined the department, I took time to engage individual directorates to understand how things are done in this particular department. I also took time to visit projects. This is what I do, oversight every quarter. On 34 projects, I do, because I want to see what are we paying for. It's quite important. When we went back to the office, part of the problems we're seated with is variation orders that are coming based on lowest bidders. Because when you actually assess, the lowest bidder end up being the highest bidder when you look at the variation orders. Those in the industry would know what I'm talking about. Of course, all of us here, we are in the industry. And it goes back to the conversation to say, shouldn't we really consider whether the lowest bidder is the most important element that we need to look into, especially when it comes to built industry? Because in most cases, you find out that they have, a contractor has underquoted, and leading to what you are indicating around the Western Cape, the George building. We're not saying anything. I'm not speculating or indicating anything. I'm just saying these are the lived realities. But this is where Auditor General comes in and regulations comes in. So how do we then review our regulations? And this particular commission also say, these are the proposals that were given to the sector, to the department to say, look into this. Because our conversations will not go beyond this particular summit, but also engage Treasury, including President, given his commitment to continuously engage us as a sector. So this is a very important conversation that we need to really dwell into and agree that in the process of having this conversation, we don't leave the transformation element behind. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, MEC. I think we're going to open up, we have just looked at the aspect of tender cancellation and non-awards, and also how to improve quality of tender documentation. I want us to take 3 questions from the audience, just 3 questions. I see a hand there, another one here. Yes, thank you very much. First, I'm going to make it 1 per role. I saw the lady there. Yes, thank you. Go ahead. Let's go straight to the point. You can introduce yourself.
Thank you very much, Program Director. My name is Clara Sigelelwa Sodlula Shemwenze, the President of South African Women in Construction and Built Environment. Firstly, I would like to thank and appreciate the presentation made by the panel, more especially Mr. Lungisa Tele, who is there as a contractor, because we couldn't be there as contractors, hence we are here. Siyabulela Mhlekazi. You have mentioned an issue, somebody mentioned an issue there of tender cancellations. As women that are in business, looking at the commission number 1 and the heading that says industry performance achievements, we are not yet there. More especially that women decided to be part of this industry through the former minister, Mama Stella Stau, who formed our organization in 1997. We appreciate the fact that some of us who are here in the CIDB with higher gradings, but as a person who is leading women, we are expecting women to be transformed from grade 1 to the higher grades, but we are not yet there. The 40% that we are talking about in papers, it has not yet been realized, Chairperson. So we are here as women to say, women are looking forward in making sure that they are empowered. Then the second one is the one of those tender cancellations. One is interested in knowing, Zimbili, you have explained and also responded to some of these issues. What is the reason of these tender cancellations?
Thank you.
Because after the submissions that we are making as organizations or as companies, there is a bid evaluation committee. Ingaba, a problem is there. Where is the problem? Because as people on the ground, some are emerging companies, they make sure in order for them to submit those tenders, they must go and make sure that compliance is in order. Compliance is nothing else but money. You spend money in order for you to comply. Then you spend money in order to you to do those bids and quantities and so on. But when it comes to the responses from the departments of government and so on, we don't get joy as women that are emerging on the ground. In Doni Ngaki, what is it that is a problem?
Okay. Thank you very
and
much.
who is supposed to monitor these
Thank you very
things?
much, ma'am.
On Papa, I'm representing 9 provinces. Women are really not here, but some of them are expecting responses. Where is transformation in all these things? There is 40% set aside. That is not a favor for women.
Okay, let's go
But
to
we
Sean.
don't get that 40%. And we are frustrated. What frustrated me was, is that in these sessions, we are supposed to have the principals that were there in the morning, seated there so that they can listen. We are happy that some of the HODs and other political heads are here. But if this thing can be really considered, Uguti, women are there to be transformed, but we are not yet there.
Thank you
Whilst
very
we
much, ma'am.
appreciate
Thank you very
that there is a journey that we have traveled together with the government as women. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please, colleagues, can we keep it very straightforward? Let's ask the question. I see a hand here at the back, at the middle. Yes, we'll take 3 questions. We still have more questions to discuss, so you will be given your opportunity. Can you help us at the middle here? The gentleman there, thank you. Let's ask the question so that we can quickly cover a lot of other things. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Prof, and thank you to your panelists. My name is Mandla Msweli. I'm the COO at Brawl Property Group. And my question, actually, the comment I have is just to echo what Mr. Lungisa Chele has just mentioned about the challenge of not looking at the total cost of ownership when we are doing tenders. What we've been observing of late is that the criteria when we are being scored for bids that we submit to government, they tend to have a 10% for solutioning and 90% for pricing. And that basically leads us into this situation that, in my opinion, we find that we go for the lowest bidder, but we forget that it's not only about construction only of that building or the infrastructure. There is also what we call operations and management, which has to kick in after the building, or asset life cycle management. Maybe a specific question, Prof, to Mr. Lungisa, is how are you dealing with the whole issue of skill shortage? Because as Brawl Property Group, we believe in local empowerment, in making sure there's localization. We use local subcontractors. We advance the agenda of women empowerment when we execute projects. How are you dealing with that element? Because I believe that's the one element that's important that will deal with the so-called construction mafia when we've got that local element and empowering local women in our projects. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let's take the last question on this section. There's a hand there. Yes, let's take one more. Please, let's ask the question. Go straight to the question, please.
Thanks, and good afternoon. Yeah, I don't have a question. I've got some answers for the panel there, because I'm worried. We've been talking about these issues for a long time, and we are not getting solutions. When we get out here, we want to implement these issues at the end of the day. We must first separate goods and services from what is infrastructure procurement, because the two, they are different. In terms of quality, goods and services, you get things from the shelves. And you can't punish a contractor if he can't, if you have specified a tissue, it will be a tissue, a one plier or whatever. But in terms of construction, we need to be careful when coming to that. And framework agreement, they talked about it, it will solve most of our problems. Because framework agreement is us who's supposed to give you how much that project will cost. You can give us your pricing, but we'll rationalize it, and the QS is supposed to approve what is market related. It will deal with that issue of the lowest contractor. And when we approach Treasury for money, we'll be having people who are going to do those projects, and we'll have money in the side. So the issue of underspending,
thank you very much,
will be dealt with.
All right, thank you so much. Colleagues, panelists, we have 2 questions. We don't all have to speak to it. Probably if you have something to say, somebody want to respond. Mr. Chris?
Yeah, I like the contribution from the gentleman from Brawl. We never procure and start our infrastructure process from the total cost of ownership perspective. The best practice apportionment I can share with you is your consulting engineering for a project, be about 5 years, constitutes 2% of that total cost of ownership. 15% you can attribute to construction. That's probably another 5 years. So you've got 10 years. Your operation and maintenance is meant to be another 20, 30, it can even go to 40 years if your starting point was right. And if you look at the cost contribution, it's massive. But we think we've done the job by purchasing bargain basement intellectual services as a start, and we ignore the fact that you are dealing with an iceberg. And at the end of the day, because those are all the visible parts, your procurement rules and people who make up these rules are not the ones that have to live with the problem of operation and maintenance. And that explains why you have these astronomical budgets that you then need at local government level for operation and maintenance. And we won't even talk about when they reimburse in doing normal maintenance. But it's a total cost of ownership. And I think if I may just add there, one of the things that's lagging is our inability to get out of the blocks quickly. We just cannot get there. We've got the Public Procurement Act. It was signed off last year by the President. The regulations, consultation process started in February this year. And for the first time in the Public Procurement Act, which is different from MFMA and PFMA, it differentiates between procurement for strategic goods and services from general goods and services. But it's hanging in the air. So we're still continuing more of the same and more of the same. I think we're bordering on insanity if we think a different answer is going to come.
All right, thank you. I think let's take Mr. Lungisa before.
Yeah, no, thank you, Prof. Just on the issue of skills, my response to, you said, Mr. Msweli, my response to you is on the issue of skills. When I talk skills, I don't talk skills in a business or a particular company, because that becomes an issue of that company being an employer of choice, and therefore is able to attract the right talent into it. When I talk skills, I talk about skills in the industry. I'll give you a prime example about my journey in the industry. I'm a quantity surveyor, but early on in construction and as a graduate, you would have an opportunity in a contracting business or in any other business where you actually get to work across all the functions of a contractor. You would work in the laboratory, you would work in the civil department, in the drafting department, in the mechanical department doing maintenance. So by the time, the graduate programs of old were a lot better structured. And I think that really assisted the industry produce the skills that are required into it. The tragedy you have, and I think these are some of the consequences that exist as because of low pricing. One of the things the industry has done in the last 10 to 20 years is we've cannibalized ourselves to a point where the margins are so eroded that it's actually even difficult to actually develop skills. Companies, the construction margins, and I'm sure all your colleagues know this for a fact, one of the listed companies produced results about 2 days ago, and their net profit is 2%. I think that is not a reflection only of that entity. If you ask me, I think it's done well. The vast majority of companies in our sector are under severe financial strain. And I think the dire consequence, that has resulted from this consistent long-term low margin that we've faced. And it puts a strain in our ability to reinvest back into the industry to develop skills. And skills development, in our view, is not only the responsibility of the seaters. Skills development has always, like I've indicated, it was something that was also owned by businesses to develop their own talent pipeline. And those days, in my mind, are very, very much gone. And I think that is where we really need to start looking at, is if margins in the industry improve, it allows the industry to reinvest back in skills. And I think that is where we need to start. Thank you.
Thank you very much. IDT's chairperson.
Thank you so much. Sis Clara, at IDT, I think one of the areas where we don't have control is around what the client department does. So in the instances where we cancel a tender is when a client will agree, they will sign all of the documents required to go ahead with a project and then take a 360-degree turn partway through or even after the tender has been advertised to say they don't have budget. So it's a problem at that stage, but where it destroys industry is to be 30, 40% into the implementation of the project. And then they come back and say, we don't have the budget to finish it, we're canceling. And then we have these white elephants which are sitting because there was not appropriate planning from a budgeting perspective to say, can we deliver this project over the 3-year period that it requires to, from planning to implementation? But the minds don't work that way. And it's something that as an industry, we really, or as this commission, we really, really need to put at the heart of what we need to do. Infrastructure needs to be centralized. And its centralization, the budget needs to be centralized, the projects needs to be centralized, and they need to be ring-fenced. And the appropriate people who know how to implement need to be accountable for it. And then you also spoke on designated groups. So I think at IDT in particular, we take our designated groups quite seriously, and we're actually very proud of the work that we've done, because in the last financial year, I think on women, we were about 50%. So when industry doesn't only focus on ownership, but focuses on designated group, being it the youth, being it women, I think we do start to see some gains. And it's one of the things that we do well. With all of the mistakes that we make, one of the things we do well is the empowerment of our designated groups, the women in particular.
All right, thank you very much. Let me see, you want to say something quickly?
Just the last issue relating to infrastructure procurement. It's unfortunate that ministers not here and MECs are not here. When you look at the main MAC resolutions, the 7 pillars or 7 cardinal pillars that minister spoke to and were made reference to by the president, is that part of procurement, infrastructure procurement. It's something that we agree in principle that it has to happen. There are timelines as per MINMEC resolutions on how do we go about it, but equally, there are other stakeholders that require consultation with, for instance, the Department of Public Service, because when you do those movements within the structural aspect of organogram of government, there are processes to be followed. We have not ignored the matter. It's part of our key issues that we most probably, by the time we come back here, next time we will be able, it would have been implemented. It was a process that required more than just public works or infrastructure departments to do so, but consultation with other institutions of government, so that as we implement it, it becomes easier. And it's quite important, sir, because it speaks to issues of spec. You have individuals who are much more conversant and knowledgeable in terms of spec. You've got tenders that go out and we don't even receive responses because the procurement aspect of it does not speak to the spec, or the spec is too huge compared to the resources, all that. So it's very necessary to have procurement, infrastructure procurement separate from goods and services. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. CIDB chairperson, your hand was up. Is it a comment or is it a question? Can we have the mic here, please? Yes. For the chairperson, quickly. We'll come back to that hand now.
Thank you, Prof. I think what I've heard is issues around payment, issues around procurement, and these are the most important issues. And what worries me is that I think it has been said that the Procurement Act, the regulations are being developed as we speak, and they still don't talk about infrastructure procurement. And what I was really expecting from this session is that, especially the delegates, we need to make noise and start lobbying as an industry. We need to show the frustration and express the views so that the CIDB and every other relevant stakeholder here can take this matter up. Because we will talk here, come back here next year, and it will happen. The regulations are coming out, and yet we are all identifying one critical issue, that there needs to be infrastructure procurement, which is different. So I think somehow, Prof, reporting back to plenary, we need to highlight those issues, and we need to resolve around them and make sure that these are the things that are taken up, and also identify who actually needs to take this up. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Panelists, let's continue. We're going to take more questions. Let's look at the issues of performance measurement and monitoring. I think these are some of the issues that we need to also flag concerning this particular commission. And there's something that has been coming to my mind in terms of issues of the lowest bidder is something I think we should be thinking about as an industry, which we don't really hear very often, is value engineering. I think value engineering is critical. And if you look at some developing economy, even when they are even building a two classroom block, there must be a value engineering that must take place in terms of if it's really worth it. Colleagues, the question we're looking at is, how ready is the South African construction industry to adopt a unified performance reporting framework that will cover both the clients, PSPs, and contractors? Well, I think we actually have everybody here. How ready are we? And also, which criteria should be used for the performance measurement of these particular three parties to the projects? And the other question I want to also raise is, how can variation orders be managed more transparently to ensure that they are priced and also approved properly? So it's kind of three questions, and since we are seized, we can look at it from different point of view. The first one is, how ready are we as an industry to adopt a unified performance reporting framework to cover every aspect? Clients are here, the contractors are here, and also the professionals. And which criteria should be used? What do you think in terms of the performance of these particular three parties? And lastly, the variation orders. How can we manage them more transparently? Who is the first taker? Mr. Chris?
Yeah, I think the question of performance measurement is an interesting one, because it doesn't help how many performance measures you establish. If your baseline is flawed, then you will be measuring against the wrong base. And if you do it wrong, it's consequential to a company who, might well have been set up for failure. It exactly goes back to how much effort has gone into the upfront engineering and the planning, how much information has been available. Has it been clear? Have you left very little room for doubt and risk? So I worry a little bit that we too simplistically assume that it's about on-time delivery, cost. There's no project that is not going to come with 1,000,001 reasons. I mean, in a construction process, abnormally high rain, how do we predict rainfall these days with climate change? It's weird. You're getting excessive storms. That can hamper you. So, and that's still visible. We've come across public entities who assume that you can now manage your risks by requiring professionals to have performance guarantee bonds. Now, that is nonsensical, because a performance guarantee bond is money that you have unfettered access to, purely because the evidence is there in a construction process. But in a design process, if there are many players, you've got to find out who's at fault. You can't just go and dip into that. So I think we, just on the question of performance measures, it's a great aspiration. It's something we need to track. And it's something I've been curious about for a long time, because of all of these projects where we make appointments and they least cost, I wonder if the Auditor General ever has a look at closing the loop to actually see what did those projects cost. Have we got a picture of that yet? Because that would be the evidence.
Wow, thank you very much. Yes, go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you. This is something that keeps us up at night at the IDT, because our client wants a project to be delivered, and we want to do the same. And sometimes it's due to this monitoring and the misalignment between client and ourselves as the implementation agent that it doesn't happen. And the challenges we've faced are twofold. One, we have a skills resources, which has been mentioned here. We have a resources problem. because we can have the resources to chase the start of the project, to chase the different stages of the project, but those very same resources need to then be reprioritized so that we can earn our fees and the contractor can start the work. And the back end of the project is not fully resourced. There's no one to do it. And it's very difficult to actually get the skills or the people. Because the same person needs to do the full stages. So that's the one challenge we've had. The second challenge I think we haven't as a business been able to wrap our head around is technology adoption. Because where you have a limitation in people, where can you then utilize technology to be able to monitor? And we don't have the solution for this, because I think everyone gets a little bit worried when we talk technology adoption, because we know that it's costly. Because you can have all the drones in the world or whatever, and we're talking South Africa that is still being industrialized. So the areas that we
This remains very, very inconsistent. So, ladies and gentlemen,
do business is in the Eastern Cape, where to go from one project to the other is thousands of kilometers. Of a drone from going from one place to the other. So if we can, as an industry, actually brainstorm how we solve the issue of skills, how we solve the issue of industrializing provinces, and how we solve the issue of technology adoption, given the limited financial resources that we have.
thank you very much. Andres.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So if I could maybe just chime in on 2 points. So the first point, I think there wasn't sufficient noise for the observation made by the chairperson. I think the chairperson of the board is now left. But there is a critical recommendation that needs to be taken up seriously by the industry. So once we walk out of here, Chair, and all the members of industry do not make their voices heard, it means that you will be the most affected and impacted by the regulation and the legislation that will get passed. And therefore, if your opinion or your inputs are not taken into account, you will continue to suffer the same frustrations. So let's make sure that we utilize the opportunity to also then provide the necessary inputs, the consultation processes. You may not get everything you want, but at least at the core, somebody might hear some of the things that the industry wants to see being implemented to fast-track delivery, etc. Then the second point is the one on the delayed projects. Since CEO called the AG's name by direct name, I'll quickly just respond on that one as well. So as I mentioned earlier on, we do make quite a bit of directed and concerted effort to understand the implications and the root causes of delayed projects. So it's something that we also invest in as the Office of the AG. Again, if you refer to some of our reports that we issue, there's a dedicated section that deals or seeks to just give a government-wide reflection of the work we would have done on infrastructure. So we don't say infrastructure on health, infrastructure on education. So we look at a number of projects across various sectors, and we try and give a industry-wide infrastructure message. And certainly there are certain projects where we have costed the impact and the implications of the delayed projects. And it's a lot of money, and it's money that could have been used elsewhere for the delivery of services or for the deployment of different infrastructure that could have serviced our citizens. And then lastly, I think on the issue of systems, I would like to also support the notion tendered by the chairperson of the IDT. So there are vast opportunities that exist to deploy information technology infrastructure to assist us, technologies, systems. But again, coming back to what the CEO said and yourself, Madam Chairperson, at the core of it, we are going to have to get real about what the real root causes are that continue to plague the industry. Is it a regulations problem? Is it a skills problem? And if we say it's a skills problem or regulation problem, then what about it is the problem? People get employed, people are in the particular client departments, but yet we continue to see the challenges that we encounter. So are we sure that we've really unearthed the real root causes so that we can then make sure that when we advance recommendations such as the implementation of a consistent performance monitoring and management system, that we've at least dealt with the fundamental issues and the foundations are solid that will provide us the platform to catapult us to the next level of delivery. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Prof, quickly,
Yes, okay.
on technology.
On technology or the performance measurements?
Performance measurement, go ahead.
Because that's what I wanted to answer. So in terms of the performance measurement, how ready is the SA construction industry? I think they are very ready because data is being taken by the clients, the contractors, and the industry itself through the CIDB. So there's data that is being documented on the performance of the industry, but then this data is not standardized. We don't have a standard definition for what quality is. When we say quality, what do we mean by quality? We need that standard definition. We also need standards for productivity because this will enable us to plan. When we talk of productivity, South African National Standards does not have the productivity targets. Most construction companies have it, so you have to work for a construction company to be able to understand how many bricks should a worker lay in a day. But we don't, even in the university, we don't have any referral points to standard production targets, which I think we need. It's very crucial. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I just want to come back to the panel again. There's a question we're not picking out. They say, which criteria do we think should be used for the performance of the three parties to the project? Because there are times that we cast blame on each other. And I don't want us to discuss this. If we can just name them to say these are some of the things that we should envisage, some of the criteria that should be used for the performance of PSP, of client, of contractor. Can we just quickly flag them?
Prof, it's collaboration. I think one of the things, and maybe I'll link the two, professional service providers are appointed by the client to deliver a project that is fit for purpose by a competent contractor that will execute in accordance to what the project is designed for. So I think for me, it's that understanding that we are jointly responsible, both as professionals and as the contracting entity, to deliver a fit-for-purpose project for the employer. And what is fit-for-purpose project it's obviously it being delivered within the right, sort of quality as what is expected. I think what then happens, which is a tragedy, oftentimes, and I'm not casting blame on my consulting entities, oftentimes they side with the employer, even in instances where it's evident that the contractor has done their work. And I think that's where we really get projects getting into a point of frustration. So projects must be managed and delivered in a way that is fit for purpose. I think that's critical.
Thank you very much. So you mentioned collaboration.
Correct.
Yes, Mr. Kasim?
Thank you, Chair. Our view is that exactly in that vein, as much as a contractor is required to deliver on the contractual requirements, whether it's the specifications in terms of quality, time, budget, in the same vein, consultants have the same brief, or at least in terms of have a brief, where they also have to perform. Okay. And we can take it a level further than that. We can also now look at clients, for example. Clients, and we spoke about it for a while here, is that they also have a role to play and responsibility in terms of getting the project to their required outcome or fit for purpose. Therefore, they need to also provide certain information, for example. So what we're looking at is, coming back to the criteria, it's a collaborative issue, like the colleague was saying here. It's not a clear answer, but there are guidelines in terms of, for example, deliverables. Each partner or stakeholder has a deliverable. And that is what we are looking at in terms of the CIDB. We've tried it in the past. in terms of contractors, for example, performance reports. But then there are other parties contributing perhaps to their non-performance. So we're looking at a holistic view in terms of the three parties to the project so that we can look at monitoring that and also in terms of intervening for development purposes. In other words, we look at what are the shortcomings, like my colleague next to me saying, we need to understand what are the requirements, for example, what are the challenges, before we can even go in terms of looking at the criteria. And I think it's a collaborative sort of approaches.
Okay. Thank you very much. Colleagues, let's take 2 more questions from the audience on this issue of performance. Yes, yes. Please, there's a gentleman there. Thank you so much. On the issue of performance, thank you.
Afternoon.
Yes, sir.
I think I might be off track a little bit, but I hope I'm not crying at the wrong funeral. My name is Sammy Mangana. I'm a construction management graduate from the University of Pretoria. I'm also part of a non-government organization called Construction Network South Africa, which focuses on upskilling the construction graduate. Yeah. All right. My question is more relating to the CIDB, speaking to unemployed graduates, trying to address that, to find out what exactly is stopping or what are the barriers that are faced from implementing or introducing a requirement, an academic qualification requirement to register your company with CIDB from grade 1. I ask this because there's a lot of unemployment graduates amongst the construction industry. Yeah, we matriculate, we are told that the construction industry or built environment, that's where the market is, that's where the demand is, you study, and then now you're sitting at home with unemployment.
Thank you very much. There's another hand here. Let's take that other hand here, the gentleman over there. Yes. Let's take that question, then we'll respond and take the last set of questions before we conclude for the day.
Thank you very much, panel. My name is Werner Jurling. I'm a construction company CEO, but I'm also the vice president of SAICI. I have a specific interest in construction because I lived my whole life in it. I think we need to take things forward to the plenary tomorrow and report back. I'd like to just propose that we add a few items just in the report back. First of all, as far as productivity was concerned that we discussed now, in the hands of the contractors, I think we have a responsibility to make sure that we become more productive. So we need to have a discussion around things like lean construction, waste minimization, just working better. Second item, learnings from the past. We do not analyze projects from the past. Nobody has spoken a word about the rollout of Kusile, civil infrastructure. Medupi, civil infrastructure. IDT, we as the production and the construction professionals that worked on those projects, you need to listen to us. We need to learn what happened there, and we need to share those learnings with all of our colleagues, the whole construction industry, so that we can learn and go from project to project. The same is true for other big projects. The next one is the opportunities for us as a construction industry to learn from big projects. As a 30-year-old, I built the first cable stay bridge in South Africa. I never had built it before. Now I know how to do it. The Mtento Bridge is being built by Chinese, and I have to say this. What South African engineer is going to know how to build a balanced cantilever bridge? The last engineer that knew how to do that was Dr. Hilton MacDonald, who is retired and living in Australia. That opportunity does not exist for South Africans to learn there. And I feel extremely passionate about this. So please, if we can just talk about these things and provide it